The Master Phil in Your Corner podcast is brought to you by philross.com. Books, videos, Master Phil's survival strong living supplements, as well as self-reliance and performance enhancement presentations. It is also brought to you by the Bodybell Method, workshops and certifications, the world's only kettlebell, bodyweight, and dynamic tension system that carries continuing education credits for trainers, instructors, coaches, doctors of physical therapy, and chiropractors. In-person and virtual options are available. Please visit bodybellmethod.com. Greetings and welcome to another episode of Master Phil in Your Corner. This is episode number 141, and today we're going to be going into a deep dive with familial estrangement. And today we have what we consider a repeat offender on the podcast. We have Roland, and Lori is a psychologist, and she's going to get into the definitions of this familial estrangement, and then, hey, and how it's affecting more and more people, every day. Hi, Lori. Just give people a little background if they didn't see our part one, and so they can learn a little bit more about you in part two here.
Sure. Hi, Phil. Thanks again for having me back. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed clinical alcohol drug counselor. I have 29 years of experience in the field of both working in a high school setting as a student assistance counselor, and I also have my own practice where I see clients for trauma, addictions, narcissistic abuse, depression, anxiety, and yes, family estrangement is a big issue that I tackle in my practice as well.
Yeah, when we talk about familial estrangement, you see, this one's not talking to that one. The parents aren't talking to the children aren't talking to each other, cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever it might be. What it seems to be running rampant. I mean, I know that people always were at odds for one reason or another, but you know, does it have to do with like the term familiarity breeds contempt? Do you think that has anything to do with it?
Well, it's more than just occasional conflict, right?
Yeah.
These type of situations are punctuated by emotional and physical severe distancing, and that could occur for a number of reasons. It could be emotional abuse, neglect, trauma, a mismatch of values that aren't aligned, right? The person feeling disrespected, not heard, not seen, favoritism, perceived favoritism, and mental health and substance abuse issues as well.
Wow. So there's a lot involved there, and like most things, I would think that it's not just one aspect. Sometimes they come together, they converge. So you might have someone who's got a drug or alcohol problem, and then they feel slighted, and they're jealous, and maybe it's a combination of those things.
It could be, and it's pretty common. A
Yeah.
study out of Cornell, 27% of people in America have an estrangement, one in four people. So
Wow.
it is common. And what it is, it's kind of like a dirty little secret.
Hmm.
We grow up on the notion that family is everything. Family, Mother's Day, Father's Day, all of those things. And it's counterintuitive to not do that.
Yeah.
And people harbor a lot of shame. They think that they are the only ones. And it's often something that someone holds in isolation until they start maybe going to therapy, getting support, and normalizing it.
So, one thing is, let's say, the way I look at it is how to avoid it. Is it avoidable? And then, how to deal with it once you have it.
It's a unique situation and a very personal one
Yeah.
for every single person. And whatever way an individual decides to go, there's going to be pain. There's going
Yes.
to be emotional harm caused. If it is not natural to not speak to someone. And as a therapist, I'm wired to fix things, right? Therapists are healers. We're wired to fix. We're wired to make it better, find answers, find out the why behind behaviors. And a person needs to come to the conclusion that remaining in this relationship is causing me more emotional harm. And I don't feel the support and I don't feel safe here. When you walk in a room of people, You want to feel like they have your back, they protect you, you want to feel safe, emotionally safe. And when that becomes compromised,
Mhm.
it fragments that core relationship.
It can be even something as simple as this. When let's say you have someone in your family, let's say you have a family of four, and one person decides to be vegan. So now we have Thanksgiving dinner. So they're not going to eat the turkey. You have to have something else for them there. And then and they kind of stick to this, and before you know it, years go by or months go by, whatever it is, and then people aren't eating the turkey now. Now they're eating tofu or soy or something, as opposed to eating the turkey because they don't want to make different stuff, but they're all bending to this person's will, and then sometimes people get fed up with that. But what what is it that that people say, well, you know what, I'm offended by the fact that you're eating meat. I'm just using this one as an example. I'm offended by the fact you're eating meat. So you know what? Everyone around me can't eat meat. Or maybe, or even more so, I see it in the political arena, um, where people say, "Oh gosh, yeah, my parents voted for this person. I wanted this person. We're not aligned." Um, where does this come in, especially when you're raised in a home? Is it happening in the universities? Is it happening in media? Is it happening in the social realm? So what are some of the things that are affecting this and causing this schism between family members on things that really shouldn't matter? You know?
Well, the first thing when you were speaking about the tofu and the turkey, what was
Yeah,
coming to my mind was, is that a deal breaker for you? And to most people, it wouldn't be. It's pretty simple. You can have turkey for some people, tofu for others.
right.
So assessing whether it's a deal breaker. And to answer your question, to your point, yes, it's happening societally. And with social media platforms, we see all the arguments. We've heard, we all have a friend at this point, or maybe a friend that we don't associate with as much because varying political opinions
Mhm.
and people not being in alignment. And until people find a way to successfully manage differences and conflict reduction skills, that's a big part of it. John and Julie Gottman are pioneers in family therapy. And when
Mhm.
I'm working with couples and families, they speak about the four horsemen. And the four horsemen in communication are contempt, criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And in family systems where those characteristics are the hallmark of how the family may be navigated, situations, conflict,
Mhm.
those types of families are more prone to estrangements. So back to the tofu, if that family is able to successfully accept that somebody eats differently, their choices, and they
Mhm.
have options for all, that's a successful conflict resolution. If the family says, whoever's hosting Thanksgiving says, this is the way it is, we don't care what you eat. And if you don't subscribe to what we eat over here, don't come,
Mhm.
and draw that hard line in the sand. So the inability to manage differences is really the beginning of the roots that begin to chip away at the core of a family. And the estrangement can be parent to child, it could be siblings, it could be extended family, many varying different kinds. And it usually begins somewhere in a person's 20s. That's common, that
Yeah.
age.
Now, why is that? Because because the pre most of the thought occurs in the prefrontal cortex there, and they're formed as a human, they formed as their opinions, or is it because the experiences that they have put them in a position that they think that they know better, or maybe they do know better?
Well, let's go back to that. And there certainly is a biological component, but every life skill, right? There's a task. When you're an infant, the task is to hold your head up, support your neck,
Yeah.
crawling, walking, running, different developmental skills. The task of adolescence is individuation. And that's typically a time punctuated by a lot of conflict between parent to child. And that conflict is needed so the adolescent can then individuate, spread their proverbial wings, and get out and survive on their own. And
Mhm.
around your 20s, barring any type of failure to launch type of situation, by the time you're in your 20s, 30s, you've been out, you've been exposed to different people, you've been out on your own possibly, and you've been around possibly for the first time health. It's not uncommon for me to hear from clients, I didn't realize I would go to college and I would go home and visit my friends' parents, and they were nice to each other. There was no fighting. They were the same around the company than they were around us. And that was mind-blowing to me. And I'll say, tell me more. Well, my house wasn't like that. My house was a lot of gossip. My house was a lot of people backstabbing, talking about each other. And I thought that families that were nice like this were like unicorns. I didn't think they existed. So by the time, back into the original question, why does that occur in your 20s, 30s? It's because you've had a little bit of chance, an opportunity to live, to adapt, to see how other modalities and families occur. And maybe it highlights for you contextually, maybe some of the dysfunction that you had experienced in your family of origin.
Now, what about something that I've seen? Kids go off to college, and then they're faced with an indoctrination of sorts. Okay, and and then they turn on their parents and they reject their parents' values. They reject the family. They go and replace the people in their family with other people who are like-minded to them. Um, and then sometimes they just go and just get cut off with not even much of a warning, just cut off, and then they refuse to associate with the parent again. Um, what does one do in a situation like that?
What would a parent do? And I do hear that from families as well. I have a very good friend
Hmm.
whose child went on to get a job and went to a university and working at the new job, and it's a great career. The varying differences in political views caused some serious tension in that relationship.
Hmm.
I'm happy to say they've kind of learned to communicate about them, but before that, there was a lot of tension, a lot of strain. So, yes, when an individual goes to a college or university and embraces the culture of that college or university, it can seem to a parent, what is this, a cult? What's going on? This is my child. I raised them. As far as I knew, we had similar beliefs. And to have your child grow up and individuate from that can be very daunting to a
Hmm.
parent. And accepting they don't have to understand those differences.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that with your child? How do you talk about that? Do you have an open conversation about it and say, just because we have differences of values, I may not understand yours, you may not understand mine, but I still love you. That doesn't have to interfere. How can we not let that interfere with our relationship? Just questions. But when somebody digs their heels in, is spiteful, the stonewalling again, those four horsemen, productive dialogue ceases.
Yeah. And when there's no dialogue, then it definitely ceases.
It
Yeah.
does. And if somebody isn't willing, and I'm very comfortable with an idea of a parent kind of keeping that line open and
Mhm.
saying, what can we do about this? I'm here if you want to talk about this. I may not see your line of view, you may not see mine, but
Mhm.
I don't want that to jeopardize our relationship because I love you and you matter to me, the world to me. Whatever that dialogue looks like. Sometimes parents are spiteful. They don't want to say that. Sometimes parents do say it and children don't want to hear it. They're hardlining, they're where they're at, they're in their program system, college, university, friend space, workspace, and this is their belief, and they're angry at anybody and anything who varies from their beliefs.
Well, yeah, when you're in that situation, I mean, and there's no communication, it's broken down, and one party says, wants to, but yet the other party does not. Um, you know, the best way, we have to figure out the best way to handle that. I mean, so it's, do you just say, hey, okay, good, fine, that's what you want. I can't do anything about it. Do you just approach it from a stoicism approach where, hey, I'll just accept it and move on. And actually, maybe it's for the better. I mean, sometimes sometimes you may have to put that in your head that this is for the better, you know?
In some cases it is, and sometimes I normalize that for my client. And, we're not talking about, I'm not talking to you because you came late to my 4th of July barbecue,
Right,
right? We're
right.
talking about deal breakers.
Yeah.
And what's a deal breaker? What constitutes a deal breaker? And I think a deal breaker is something that occurs, and then we get into betrayal trauma,
Mhm.
where you feel some serious degree of betrayal trauma, a deal breaker that there really isn't a point of coming back from.
Mhm.
There really is kind of a point of no return. As again, as a healer, as a therapist, I don't like to never say never. But if you look at the situation and say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable, safe. I don't feel like this person has my back. I don't feel
Yeah.
safe. I'm going to keep coming back to that word. You have a choice to make. And again, there's pain either way.
Oh
It's
yeah.
I, it's almost like this, like with estrangement. I say this like in people who are estranged. Like let's say that you move to a town
Hmm.
and everyone in the town does things. There's only one social group, and they do things that you maybe morally aren't in alignment with. Maybe they gossip, maybe they do drugs, maybe they steal, maybe they're mean, maybe they just are about things that you're not into.
Hmm.
But you have a choice. You either join that club and be with that group, or you run the risk of isolation.
Yeah.
And sometimes for some people, they have to choose isolation because their moral fiber, their moral compass, their code does not feel good over here. And that's when you start getting into different family roles, much like addiction, right? There's the family hero, the mascot, the scapegoat. The scapegoat is my favorite because they're often the truth teller. And the scapegoat is not necessarily the popular one in the family, but they
Mhm.
are the ones that are going to say, hey, there's not only an elephant in the room, it's taking a crap on the floor. And they point that out, right? And they do
Yeah.
that. And nobody likes that. When the family has kind of learned to survive in this system the way they do, a truth teller coming in is not necessarily going to be popular.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you know what? Most people don't want to hear the truth.
No.
Truth hurts, and sometimes if you reflect on something you said, maybe you expose some truth to someone in your family, and maybe they did not want to hear it. And
Maybe, and they didn't want to hear it. And it doesn't have to go. There's a lot that comes before estrangement.
yeah.
There's a lot that comes before estrangement. And I also like the term, let's put it on pause. Let's put it on pause. We're not syncing up right now. I'm always going to be here for you. I'm always going to be your parent. You may not understand or respect my views, but I love you. I'm here for you. And if you want to have a conversation, I'm open. I'd like to. And
Yeah.
if the person is going to shut the door on that, there's very little for you to do with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when someone shuts the door, I mean, the thing is that if you're in a situation like that, in my view, anyway, if someone closes the door on you and they're an adult, you have to respect that.
Yeah, you do. You do have to respect that. I've heard it both ways. I've heard in some types of family estrangements, initially, sometimes prematurely cutting off that relationship can backfire because people think that, well, if I don't talk to them, they'll come after me and talk to me. I never advise people to not speak to someone as a form of punishment. When you make that decision, it's got to be because you feel better, safer, an inability to thrive by staying in a system with those people.
Hmm.
And some people will come in and say to me, my parents said, I tried. And when I look for, well, how did they try? Tell me how they tried. I'm not hearing it.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing a real, true, bona fide, authentic, genuine way that a parent tried, and pride and ego get in the way. When you are talking about that stuff, you really need to leave pride and ego at the door. In the school system, I work with adolescents. In my practice, it's primarily adults. And I always say, when you're working with adolescents, leave your ego at the door.
Yeah.
Because if you go in trying to take that hard line, it's not going to work.
Yeah, because I think that people also always want to be proven that they're right. They always want to say, "Oh, well, I'm right. Well, she did this or he did that, and they got to apologize, or I'm not going to talk to them, or something along those lines." Um, the thing is, even in my view, as a parent, even if you are the one that is correct, you still have to just put that aside and try to reach out to them. Um, and then, you reach out, and then, it depends on the person. If they do not respond to you, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever goes by, it may be better for you just to stop trying to communicate, because maybe that is something that they don't want you to do. Because obviously, if they wanted you to communicate with them and they wanted to speak with you, they would have returned a call or a letter or
It would have.
something at some point. But like, what do you say? Well, what is the what is the point when you stop? Is the point you stop, when you're just, you know, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year? I don't know. When do you stop?
There's not a numerical value with that. That's a personal feeling. And I would say that when you come to a place where you feel you've emotionally exhausted all options,
Yeah.
you've made olive branches, you've extended bids, you've extended invitations, and this person, just for whatever reason, has decided, no,
Yeah.
I just don't want that. And it's painful.
Mhm.
It's very painful. I once said to a father, and this particular student that I had in mind, she's a mom now, she's married. I actually went to her wedding,
Yeah.
but she was having when she was a high school student, she had a lot of conflict with her father. Her parents were divorced. And to the father's credit, he would come to the school and meet with me and drive a pretty good distance. At the time, he was living out of state. And I remember once I said to him, well, do you want to be right or do you want a relationship with your daughter?
Yeah.
And at the time, and he kind of had what I would call a kiss the ring style of parenting.
Yeah.
And a lot of people on TikTok, you'll see a lot of rhetoric that's commonly associated with boomer parents, right? That's
Mhm.
very big on TikTok if you're on that algorithm and looking at that. But he really kind of was open to suggestions and showing humility
Mhm.
and really understanding his daughter's feelings. I mean, there was a philosophy there that, well, I'm the parent. I don't need to listen to her feelings. It's my way. I'm the parent. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's when I asked him, do you want a relationship? And he stopped for a minute and he said, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
And we ended up having a really good relationship. And that relationship between them is strong today.
Good, good. It's good to hear. Yeah, the things that when you look at some of these situations and maybe the parent comes in and maybe they're oblivious to that there was a conflict. That can happen too. And then the child just decides, hey, I'm done. And the parent doesn't know it. And then, you look at you look back and say, gosh, I did so much for you, did so much with you. We thought it was good, and now I get blindsided. Um, do you think that there could that some drug treatments could actually affect that thinking? Because what if the child comes and says, or a parent, or it could be the other way, the parent comes and bases their decision on something that's definitely 100% lie. How would address something like that? Like, hey, I'm just going to use an example. Like this kid, she says, "Oh, you did this, 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 and this, and it's not true. It's like 100% not true." Um, and sometimes I know that prolonged use of SSRIs and other psychotropic drugs can leave lapses or gaps in memory. Um, and what do you do in a situation like that when you're being accused of like like bona fide lies that everybody else in the world knows is not true, and this person is under that operating under that auspice that this is what happened, even though it didn't.
I would look to the individual making the allegation or the statements and assess, are they active in addiction? Are they on antidepressants? Are they in an element of psychosis? Is there a degree of mental illness there?
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's that's important. I would assess all of those things. And it really, and I learned this a long time ago. Family dynamics are so interesting, and family of origin wounds
yeah,
are really the root of so many problems. And in working with families and people and adults coming in, helping them understand how their family of origin wounds led them to picking and selecting certain partners, it all ties in. But in family dynamics, you can ask every single member of a family what the perception is. Like, tell me about your family growing up, and every single member will have a different version or narrative, if you will, and they believe it. That's
yeah,
their narrative. And if somebody comes in, to my office, this was an example that a brilliant professor gave to me and said, if your client comes in and they don't seemingly have or not showing any type of mental illness or psychosis, but they tell you, and you say, I always say, what brings you my way? Right? That's an opener for me. What
yeah,
brings you my way? And they said, well, I think there's a sea monster living in my chest. I don't say to them the same, this is my perception of my family. My mother did this, my father did this. It's not my place to say, no, they didn't, or get over that, or that's not right. I have to say, tell me more so I understand. And it's really getting to know that person's version, narrative, and their experience
Yeah.
of what they experience and understanding it for them.
But if this person is operating under these false pretenses, they're basing their decisions on that. As a person who's being falsely accused, how do you address that? And especially when now, I'm not talking to you because of this, and this, and this, and this are not true. Um, at some point, you have to say, this is what that person wants.
I
And
might say that you're entitled to your perception and your feelings. I can't ever tell you what not to feel. I disagree, and we can choose to remember things differently.
yeah.
We can choose to remember things differently.
Mhm.
If you ever want to revisit things, I'm open to that. I love you. And it's okay. We can choose to remember things differently and then decide, maybe put the relationship on pause,
Mhm.
maybe step away, take a break, maybe decide for yourself. And this helps clients feel a locus of control. Maybe step away. And then if you want to, in a certain amount of time, after you've taken some emotional space to kind of lick your emotional wounds, and if you want to revisit and reopen the line of communication at a future date, if you decide so, then you can do that.
Yeah.
If it's still met with the same level of anger, aggression, then it's time to kind of, step back
Yeah.
for your own protection.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you have to watch out for yourself, you know, in these situations. Um, now, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm listening to you. It's okay. You're good.
Yeah. So, now one other thing you can bring up, we can talk about is the fact that when you come to these terms and you said, well, this person has cut me off. Now, what about when they come back? You can never go backwards in a relationship.
Right.
That level of trust may never be the same. And 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 now you have a whole different dynamic to the relationship. Um, because the thing is, when something like that happens, how can you really 100% trust someone when they've, you know, stabbed you in the back?
When
Yeah,
they've betrayed you, there's no guarantee.
yeah,
And words have to align with actions, right? If I come back and I say that I'm sorry, I want to rebuild a union, but a person isn't hearing you, and if what they're saying is not aligning with their actions, that's something to look out for, and understanding that, what, the relationship from this point forward may not be fully healed. Baby steps, guidelines for moving forward, therapy, and utilizing an outside party.
mhm,
And if you don't have the skills to be able to talk to one another, if it gets heated, if you don't have that, going to a therapist may be a way to kind of mitigate those difficulties and complexities in the conversation. And that's something that people have to accept going forward, that, it may not be the same, it may be different. And I don't fully trust this person. I don't know if they'll hurt me again.
mhm,
So
yeah,
that's where boundaries come into play.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's solid advice, because once someone does that, takes it to such an extreme level, um, it's very difficult to in my opinion, I think it would be virtually impossible to trust them at the same level again. There'd have to be a real, like, coming to Jesus moment, or they'd have to really you know come forth and show good cause for what they did, and why they wouldn't do it again. But still it would I think it still would be in the back of your mind.
Would be, and in particular, when it comes to addictions or substance abuse, a lot of trust gets lost with that, because typically with addiction, there's stealing, there's lying, usually that accompanies it, and trust is severed.
Yes.
And having an individual like that around who's maybe been clean, maybe they completed a program, there's always going to be that nervousness or that hesitation or wanting to believe that the individual is clean. And there's a lot of grief that comes with these things. I always say, like, when we think of grief counseling, bereavement therapy, those are terms that pertain to when a person passes away, when
Hmm.
a person, when we have a loss. We grieve people that are still alive all the time.
Yep.
And as a therapist, I believe that that's harder because when the person is deceased, there's no more choice. They are gone. There is nothing more to be done. But when you have a person who is still alive and there's an estrangement, and you live your life feeling that you don't even matter to them,
Yeah.
that's worse. That feels like death to some people within itself, and they have to grieve that every day.
Well, that's rejection. That's
Yes.
rejection of everything that you did. That's rejection of your love. That's rejection of your commitment, rejection of you as a person. And to know that that person's walking around harboring these feelings against you is, it's not easy to comprehend or accept. And, we don't want to have to accept that. But, for our own protection in these situations, sometimes it's better just to say, you know what, I'm better off without this person because evidently if someone feels that strongly, if they're that negative about me, that's how they feel, that negative. I mean, is it better that that person has been purged from my life? Uh, again, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I would
And
assume
it's
it's different.
also it's looking at, where is that individual in their life? Are they in a good place? Are they happy with themselves? Are they good with their own life? Are they, you could, because you do seek your level.
Mhm,
What is the emotional health and the emotional maturity
mhm.
of that person? There's a great book. I love her work, Lindsay Gibson. She speaks about emotional immaturity.
Yeah.
And some families grow up with very emotionally immature communication. And when the parents are modeling that behavior, it's very difficult. And you also have to look for things like, is the whole family estranged? Are there multiple estrangements here? Is it just one person? And again, that could be in a case where there is an addiction and it's one individual, and that the addict is the one that's estranged, but the rest of the family seemingly is intact. Or are there multiple people not talking here? And what's this about? Are there multiple people talking to what type of dynamics went on? Was there divide and conquer? Was there favoritism amongst the siblings? Was there a golden child? Was there a scapegoat? All of those different things. So really, it's something that needs to be uniquely looked at, and every case is different, and every perception of the person within that family is also different. What we do know is that there's pain.
Yeah.
There's pain, there's a lack of understanding, there's grief. And again, grieving people that are still here, I
Mm.
believe, is harder than grieving people who are no longer here.
Oh yeah. I would have to agree with you, because that person is gone and
Yes.
the other person's still here harboring that ill will,
Yeah.
or negative feelings or whatever it is toward you. One thing though that I think is important to bring up is the lens that people apply. When people, hey, my parent is talking to me, I put this filter on, or my teacher's talking to me, or my siblings talking to me, and they already come in with a filter, and that they look through that filter, and everything they say and do is through this lens. So, sometimes people have to maybe take their glasses off and say, well, maybe I should look at it differently here, go through a different lens or not have one or just actually listen. And I think a lot of times that gets applied here and it really shouldn't be. You should try to drop that. Like here, just if you're doing something, let's say you're a coach. Except that this is what I do. And you have your athlete and you really believe in them and you say, and then maybe I'll talk wrestling because that's my thing. And yeah, you can take this guy and the guy, maybe the guy's really good. Yeah, you got this, you got this. Now, the athlete may feel like the coach is putting pressure on them, where the coach just wants to, give him confidence and help him out. And the same thing can be said of a child and a parent. When a parent is trying to get the child to do something, and the child is thinking, "Oh God, they expect too much of me. They want this. I can't do it. But the parent just wants the best, or the coach just wants the best, and yet the perception, because of the lens that they're looking through, is showing them something else. How do
Well, perception, that's the conversation. And that's if say that each member, and that's a great example, say that the coach went and talked to a therapist or a counselor about that and said, I was really, truly, honestly thinking I was being supportive.
right,
And then the player went to a therapist and said, I just felt that he was pushing me. I wasn't comfortable. He wasn't understanding where I was at. That's a conversation. That's a crossed wire and saying, let
right,
me hear you. But if your attitude is on the coach and that's all there is, on the coach, it's my way or the highway. That's again going back to those stonewalling,
right,
defensiveness, criticism, those hallmark emotional immaturity. If you have emotional intelligence as a coach, you can say to that wrestler, what was going on for you? In my mind, I thought I was supporting you, but that you didn't seem to read it that way. So something got lost in the translation. Help me understand. I love the lines, help me understand. And I love tell me more. Because the best thing you can do for anybody, whether it's a friend, a relationship partner, family member, become a student of them. Understand if somebody doesn't matter to you and you're able to just cut them off and say, well, I tried and you really didn't try.
yeah,
And you really didn't try, but you want to tell yourself at night on the pillow, yeah, I tried, but you really didn't.
hmm
You really didn't.
hmm
You really have to look at that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I like that. Hey, help me to understand here. Tell me
Right.
more. That's it's a great tactic to employ. But the thing is that you have to have that communication, and the athlete has to feel confident enough to bring this up to the coach, and the coach has to be open enough to listen.
Some people look at that as weakness, right?
Yeah.
Some people look at that, some people look at therapy as weak. Some
hmm
people look at therapy as stupid. Some people look at therapy as all the crazy people go.
Yeah.
I will tell you that as a therapist, it's not the crazy people that go to therapy. The
Mhm.
crazy people are the ones that are causing the person to come to therapy in the first place. Okay, that's a hard, fast fact. They come in, especially in narcissistic relationships
Yeah.
or emotional immature families. People are coming in going eye to eye. They can't make heads or tails of it. They're so emotionally dysregulated because of the games that go on in families like that. It's exhausting, and the gaslighting, the sheer gaslighting. When you've got those dynamics in families, you can't compete with them. It's never going to get better if somebody is kind of making digs and jabs. It's authentic communication. Back to your example with a coach and a player. That's like saying, tell me what you were experiencing that because I didn't get it. I wasn't syncing up. My way is to kind of drive and push, and I think I'm doing good things. But if that wasn't kind of working for you, let's work together so we
Right.
can kind of bring out the best in you. Some people would look at that as I'm the coach. I don't have to do that. It's my program.
No, no.
So again, back to that question, like with my student, what do you want? Do you want a good relationship with your player and your teammates on your
Mhm.
team, or do you want to be right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thing is that people operate different emotionally, just as people learn differently, right? You have visual, you have the people who need to read something, people actually have to be tactile, put their hands on it, and the same thing with offering criticism to an athlete. Some people like to hear it right away, get it out of the way, get it done. Some people, hey, listen, be positive at first, and then we'll talk later. And some people like, I'll come to you when I'm ready. You have to know the athlete. Everybody's different. Everybody has a little different thing about them, and they're going to respond differently. So, as a coach, a good coach, you have to know your athlete individually, just like you have to know your child individually. I got three kids; they're all different, you know, and none of them came with a manual. So,
No, none of them came with a manual. There's a great resource I want to leave your viewers with.
yeah,
Matthias Barker, Matthis Barker. He's on YouTube. He's a therapist who specializes in family estrangements, and he's got some really good information on how to navigate those really difficult channels and in helping a person decide what's the best course for you because it really doesn't typically start with one day you're talking, the next day you're not. There's usually a gradual series of instances where when a person makes that decision, they just feel I feel so unheard, so unseen.
Yeah.
These people that are supposed to love me are hanging out with people who prey on my downfall.
Wow.
How can I be around that? How can I feel safe? How can I feel important? How can I feel seen
Yeah.
by these people that are supposed to love me when they associate with people who would, again, run me over with a car, prey on my downfall? That doesn't make sense.
No.
Doesn't make sense.
Now, how do you do? What if there's somebody that's always basically been supportive, and then they still get cut off?
That's hard because when
Yeah.
you feel that, you know what, I in my mind's eye, everything was okay with my child, but
Right.
maybe they went away to a school, or maybe they got with a different group of friends.
Hmm.
Maybe they went to a job and there's a cultural belief system there that is not in alignment with the one that the child and you and the dynamic in the household you grew up in.
Yeah.
So in that case, I would advise, keep the door open. This is
Mhm.
not because you did something to the child to harm them. This is
No.
because you have a different set of beliefs and understanding each other's and respecting each other's differences. You don't need to agree with them,
Hmm.
but you need to understand and respect that they feel differently. And if you, as the parent, can do that and are willing to do that, but the child isn't, leave the door open, leave the language at, I'm always going to be here. I'll always love you.
Hmm.
I'm here to listen, to understand you. Just as I accept your differences, I hope you accept mine and understand that, and that we can keep our relationship even with our respective differences.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
I'm here when you're ready to talk.
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, what I see far too often is that they they don't want to associate with you if you have those differences and harbor those feelings, which is unfortunate. I see that more and more. I hear it a lot out there. A lot of people are like, yes, I tried everything. They um, they wouldn't come back. They want nothing to do with me. Um, so best advice I can give them is say, listen, just leave, like you said, leave the door open and just go on with your life. You know?
And protect your peace. And
Yep.
the thing that I ask in session when I'm working with people is, tell
Mhm.
me what you did. And what I'm listening for in my client, if I had somebody say, but I will say this, I typically don't get clients who authentically didn't try.
Right.
And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, what did you do? Let me hear how you made arrangements and concessions and attempts to try and approach it with your child. And if at the end of the day, in working with a professional, and you're assessing from your client that, this person really tried to the best of their ability,
Yeah.
and the person is still hard fast, no, leave that door open, step back, protect your peace.
Yep.
Conversely, there are people who say they tried and really didn't,
Yeah.
and really didn't. And it goes both ways. And every case is so unique and so different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So different.
Yeah. It's funny because then you'll see some of these shows where, like, the Chuck Wepner story. Let me just. Do you ever watch it?
I've heard, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I watched it. I knew he was. He was at some fighting events that I was involved in, but he wasn't such a great dad. He just abandoned his kids. Just was into his lifestyle and so forth. And then after years and years of him being like that, he stepped back into his kids' lives, and they were very, very accepting of him, very happy that he was there, and mended the relationship. Hey, good for him. But then you look at other people who've done everything the right way, and yet their kids shut the door. You
And
know?
they shut the door. And that would be something where I would look at the individual and say, what's going on with them, that
Yeah,
they are so closed to the process. The hardest things to say, I love you, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I need help.
yeah, yeah.
People have a real hard time with those.
Yes, yeah, they do, they do, and and also there's the mental illness aspect too. The mental illness. When people have a mental illness, if you're trying to apply logic to it,
Yes.
it's not going to work.
No, the same rules don't apply when you're dealing with a mental illness at all. And that's in alignment with substance abuse. If you're
Yes.
dealing with those two variables, that's one of the factors that can lead to this. And if somebody who truly has a diagnosis of depression or anxiety, and they're maybe in an episode
Mhm.
and they're not answering calls and they're just not able in a position where they can even have a relationship
Mhm.
and work at the relationship,
Yeah.
sometimes there's a shutdown.
Yeah, what about okay? What about bipolar two? I've delved into that a little bit, and so, it just seems that a lot of people self-diagnose that they're bipolar two, and yet they can function at work and things within their relationships are not good, and it's I don't know. It's funny. I read one account where the guy was talking. He goes, "Yeah," he goes, "It's basically me, giving excuse to myself for me being an a-hole." Yeah, he functioned great at work, but then he was like terrible at everyone in his personal life. You know,
Well, behavior is problematic. If a person has a diagnosis, like I went in the school system, if
yeah,
somebody says a kid has ADHD, and what I'm looking for is their behavior consistent everywhere they go. If
right,
if they're a holy terror in school, but an angel at home, it's most likely a school problem.
right,
Conversely, if they're a hellion in the house, but they come to school and they're an angel, there's a problem in the home.
yeah,
And looking for those things and assessing that. And really, when it comes to mental illness, what's the level of functioning? Is the condition interfering with the person's ability to meet and exceed expected life roles?
mhm,
So if you're an adult and you are living and paying bills and working, whatever it is your responsibilities are, child
mhm,
responsibilities, are you meeting those goals? Are those things happening? Are they functioning? Are they going well?
yeah,
If not, there may be something to look at there if you're unable to do those things, what's going on. And there's a lot of TikTok psychology and rhetoric. I'm a big believer in looking at data-driven research. I'm not one for, and I see a lot of people on social media and TikTok calling themselves an expert when
yeah,
really what they might be is an enthusiast or interested, or maybe they even experienced it,
mhm,
but that doesn't make you a qualified expert.
no,
And really
no,
challenging people to think critically for themselves and to question the sources of where they are getting their information
mhm,
and and diagnosing. So many misdiagnosing. And,
oh,
and a lot of times, for instance, in adults, what does depression look like? It looks like the person on the couch, sleeping, can't get up, can't shower. Well, depression in an adolescent looks very different. It can look like bipolar.
mhm,
Depression in an adolescent can look like slamming a door, being angry 1 minute, and then coming down the stairs and being happy.
right, right,
Now, an adult might say they're bipolar, they're
yeah,
having a mood. And when it's really not, it's deeper, it's something else.
hmm, yeah. Good points, good points. Lori, this was fantastic. Is What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
They can find me on my website, which is my name, LoriAnnRoland.com, LoriAnnRoland.com, or I'm on Instagram as well, Lori Ann Roland Counseling, LLC, Facebook, Lori Nazaro Roland. So you'll find me.
Yep. And they'll also be tagged in in the video when we put it up and in the body. We'll put all that information. Well, again, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure to have you and strength and honor.
I'd like to thank you for having me too, Phil. It's always enjoyable to sit and talk with you and your guests, and we always just time just goes by. So
I
thank you for
know.
the opportunity for having me on.
My pleasure.